Hi, folks. Welcome back to Green Planet, Blue Planet podcast, featuring distinctly qualified global change makers that are dedicated to creating a healthier planet, showcasing qualities of planetary leadership. My name is Julian Guderley. I'm committed to a world that allows people from all walks of life to thrive. And today's episode is part of the Design Science Studio series, a collaboration with the Buckminster Fuller Institute, and my guest is Ilaria Forte. Welcome, Ilaria.
Thank you, Julian. Nice to see you.
Yeah, Ilaria, you're an unstoppable and uplifting agent of change, inquisitive scientist, and anticipatory whole systems philosopher. Ilaria has trained and inspired 500 and many plus leaders and managers in over 20 countries, from media to healthcare. And for over 2 decades, Ilaria has focused on applying scientific discoveries and research insights on developing cross-cultural innovation initiatives, shifting the culture of business from competition to radical cooperation by building capacities to foster a more creative, regenerative, equitable, inclusive world. And Ilaria, I think you're possibly one of the few scientists in the Design Science Studio, maybe even the only one for the first cohort. So I'm really stoked to have this conversation with you.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, maybe let's start by asking you about the Design Science Studio. Like, what inspired you to partake?
I think that was a coincidence, a very fortunate coincidence. I saw an email that was forwarded from a colleague of mine where he put like a headline, "This is something for you." And then I check and say, okay, yes, it's interesting. And then of course I have a long history of studying Buckminster Fuller, and especially some of the principled integrity, and also, I mean, lots of principles that they are what I call the anticipatory comprehensive thinking. And yeah, so I think it's Buckminster Fuller and this just coincidence. I like to take a spontaneous decision. It was not a difficult decision to take part of the Design Science Studio. Indeed, I enjoy very much the collaboration, and I love cross-pollination and open, fluid, spontaneous collaboration, co-creation that is going above and beyond disciplinary boundaries. So I think the Design Science Studio is just bringing all these elements together. So that's great.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's literally what intrigued me and pulled me in, right? The like connection to Buckminster Fuller and his work, and people across my path that I've met that they continue to point to Buckminster Fuller's, like body of work. But then also this, you just said it, the cross-pollination, different disciplinary backgrounds, and just people with a truly open mind.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, because I said this in the intro, you're possibly one of the only scientists. I think you were the only scientist in the first cohort. How was your impression of like being around a bunch of artists and creators and content creators, and like what's the joy and the gift in this like collaborative way of creating and learning?
I've been working. I'm working all the time with artists, and I've been working the last 20 years with artists and creators together. I am myself a scientist with an artist mind, or half scientist, half artist. So I feel very good in both container, or actually there's not a container, but both spheres of nice creation. Yeah. I believe that both the scientist and the artist have lots of common ground and lots of common way of working. So as a scientist, we do a lot of exploration. Well, as a social scientist especially, and I'm actually a semiotician and cognitive scientist, I do a lot of work, a lot of field works and a lot of exploratory, adventurous type of work, and it's very similar to the work of the artist. So I think somehow it overlaps, and especially as a working with the future and innovation. As a scientist, you have to embrace more the open and creative flow of the artist than the fixed mindset of a scientist working on some theoretical assumption. So this is, I think, my insights into the work of, you know, being both a scientist and an artist. And inside of the design science studio, I think that I can bridge very good. So I see myself as a bridge and a catalyst of these forces, both the artist and the science, more the theoretical part. I mean, I can contribute to both very good, and I can relate to both spheres very good. So I think it's enriching, it's inspiring, and it brings about a lot of innovative and disruptive way of thinking and working. So this is going a bit over the standard way of cooperation. I think it's really more this fluid and spontaneous co-creative machinery or engine that is required for creating our regenerative future, I think.
You're mentioning, you know, the buzzword, the regenerative future, and I want to dive quite a bit deeper into that with you, because one of the main, you know, kind of keywords that both the podcast Green Planet, Blue Planet, but then also the Design Science Studio is really dedicated to is the idea of the regenaissance, right? This time frame, like an evolutionary kind of response to the times we've been in and the systems we've inherited, and the way people say, you know, like business as usual. And this evolutionary reaction is the times of regenaissance, where a regenerative way of working both with the land in the sense of regenerative agriculture, but then also a regenerative way of co-creating, literally radical cooperation by fostering creativity based on multiple sectors can happen. And so I'm curious to dig in there a bit more. What were some of those like radical cooperation moments for you in the design science cohort? Like, were there like some aha moments where like, this is why this matters, and this is why people should join this cohort in the following years?
Yes, I think there are the stories. That is also the focus of my work at the Design Science Studio. And I think through stories, so we are our stories. We are the story that we tell each other, and we are the stories that we share, and the stories that we tell our children. And through stories, we encourage planetary transition, planetary metamorphosis towards a just and regenerative, creative world that is designed as gracefully and comprehensively, holistically as nature. So I think this is for me the core. So the way we reimagine and weave this mutually beneficial relationship for supporting a better future story for all. So it makes sense. So I think this is the focus on the stories, and the stories of the Regenaissance. They are the stories that the creators and the artists and the scientists and the designers of the Design Science Studio are telling, are sharing, are reinventing, reimagining, and collectively it's a tapestry. It's a beautiful tapestry with different threads. And yeah, I love to put all these threads together. And the experiment I'm doing for the Design Science Studio in cooperation with the Design Science Studio is actually to create a collective stream of consciousness in support of the Regenaissance and in support of the entire planetary transition. I mean, we are going through a massive, great transition, hopefully to a golden age. So where we survive and thrive in harmony and inspired by nature. So
it's kind of the only way forward. Otherwise, our back is against the wall. I mean, the old stories are very much the doom and gloom, and you're right. The Design Science Studio represents kind of like a cutting edge meeting point of creatives, designers, artists, creators, scientists. And I like what you said about weaving story. For me, what came up a lot throughout this entire cohort is just the necessity for a new kind of language. And I said it in your intro. You're also an expert in cross-cultural kind of innovation initiatives. And you and I share this quite a bit, because the cross-cultural space, the space of multiple languages, is the space where, well, for one, we make a lot of mistakes when we speak foreign languages, but two, those mistakes actually enable deeper levels of understanding, of connecting, and then basically birthing innovation. And so I really loved that there was such a profound depth of new terms, which we can tap into quite a bit. But I think even just the word regenaissance itself is a great example of that.
Yeah, I think it's important then to go over it. I think I'm not so much. I mean, being a futurist, we use a lot of buzzwords to let understand, what we are talking about, and also to create this vision, to embody the vision with the language. But as Wittgenstein said, the limits of my language are, or mean, the limits of my word. I think we need to be carefully picking the right word. I had a long discussion, actually, a beautiful conversation about building the future or weaving, building, weaving, or letting unfold, and coming from, I'm a Buddhist scholar, and specialize on Zen and Dogen teachings. So for me, we have nothing to build. If there is something that we can do with the future, is to let this spontaneous, effortless action, let it unfold, and let the future emerge freely from our continuous work, our continuous daily, moment by moment choices and action. So yes, the words, yes, the language, yes, the stories, and these need all to be channeled into action. So I'm very much for action, action, action. And I think the future, this regenerative future is very, is for the ones that they are willing to go the extra mile for renewing, restoring, regenerating, recreating, rethinking, and so on and so on. It's hard work. And so we need to roll up our sleeves, So it's, yes, the words, but I think at the end of the day, it's lots of action, lots of work that needs to be done. And we need to make our hands dirty. And
there's
then
quite a bit of
the word. Sorry,
no, I totally agree. I just want to one of the many words that came up, double tap on that, meaning like that's the modern version of saying I want to affirm what you're saying, just like you double tap on a picture on Instagram or so. I think what you're saying is speaking towards solutionism, right? Like a mindset and a philosophy that a better way of living is actually possible. But in order for that, we need to A, reimagine it, B, trust that it's possible. But then also this kind of planetary change can only be based on many actions that are ultimately unpredictable also. The old paradigms and the dying infrastructures of systems and bureaucracy and the way we set up this world, or people have set up this world before us, try to predict certain outcomes. But what we're looking for in a regenerative culture is ultimately quite ineffable. It's incapable of being expressed in words, because its ultimate nature is transformational in the experience itself. And just to point at that, I mean, how could it be any different, right? We're sitting, if you were listening to the doom and gloom narrative, at the 6th mass extinction And so that threshold point, in order not to make it this 6 mass distinction, but actually going into a regenerative future, it needs to be transformational. It needs to be a new kind of ineffable experience.
Yeah, it needs to be radical, and it needs to be also go a bit further into just thinking about innovating, but it's really about we are creating a system for sharing value. So we are moving from a system where we are sharing goods and money and transaction and so on, to a system where we embrace, nurture relationship and create a new era of value sharing. So what is this value that we are sharing? How we can transact value? And this, I think, is a core topic for all the systems, because I mean, when we talk about the regeneration, sometimes people say, but when you're talking about language, I mean, regeneration, so it's agriculture, you know, it's like the land and so on. I mean, yes, I'm coming from a little village and my family, they are all farmers. So I really believe that the first work is on land, on restoration and so on. But yes, and regeneration is a biological, cultural, social, and generative process that constitutes us in our really like inner journey from the beginning to till the end of our existence. So it's the entire existence is about regeneration and degeneration. So life is a constant balance, a constant play, constant fluctuation of regeneration and degeneration. So this is, I think, is important to see both sides, and it's also important to embrace both sides as we embrace light and shadow. And I think for me, seeing the regeneration, you have also to see the degeneration. So what is degeneration? Yeah. What is now degenerating as a model? And what is the regeneration movement brings about in terms of transformational experiences. So this is, we are birthing a new world, no? So this
and
is
we are, right, coming from an old world, as you say, of degeneration that try to dominate nature and kind of exchange a lot of the natural processes with robots and genetically modified crops and so forth. But that is a culture of thinking that resorts in a culture of agriculture. But ultimately, it comes back to, as you said, the whole spectrum, from agriculture to the way we treat the soil, to the way we build social structures, or maybe not build, but weave, and to the way we allow each other to be participants. And so in a way, the collective behaviors that emerge when people, places, and shared experiences collide, that is this culture, this regenerative culture in an essence. Ilaria, I'm curious about the project that you're creating around, the storytelling platform you briefly mentioned earlier. How can people find that and participate?
We are working on a platform which is called Coevolution R, and they are play a big part in all this. I just read a couple of days ago an interesting article on the Generation R, and I think, yes, we are all the Generation R, because we need to do a lot of work around the letter R. So I think it's really like the time for the rise of this everything: rebirth, resilience, responsibility, reconnection, revolution, reality. We can go on for forever here, because there are so many beautiful words with the R. The platform is already online under Coevolution R.1. And we will launch the first event in cooperation with the Design Science Studio. And this will be the third week of March, is the first collective storytelling experiment. And we will work on regenesis. rewriting the Genesis.
Nice.
So that's gonna be like a super exciting experiment. I'm very curious to see what is emerging.
Yeah, for anyone who didn't catch it, it's Coevolution R.1, and I'm going to make sure to put that in the show notes as well. Yeah, planet-centric collaborative platform for collective storytelling dedicated to whole systems renewal. And, you know, the whole idea of coevolution, or evolution even, as a process outside of us, or a process in a book, has like always just astounded me how people could say like evolution is something that Charles Darwin wrote a theory about. Evolution is what we're experiencing. Evolution or co-evolution is who we are as a species when we understand our role as a keystone species on the planet, right? Like I've often said this, we're not here to leave no footprint. We're here to learn what kind of graceful footprint to leave so that we're in harmony with the other species, the forest, the flora, the fauna. And yeah, stories are a massive part of it, because the current collective story is broken. The current collective story has a problem with death. The current collective story tries to make us immortal rather than understanding that our souls are already immortal. So it's curious. It's an invitation for anyone listening to join Coevolution R.1 and check this out and play. Ilaria, I have a few personal questions, so people get to know you a bit better and I get to know you a bit better. The first one is going to be about trust, because I've learned that a lot of these projects on the cutting edge of culture and, you know, just these new emerging fields have a lot to do with the speed of trust. So my question around trust is, just for you as a person, what is required to experience trust?
That's a beautiful question. It's such a complex question. Trust has so much to do with our with our brain, with our entire biographical work. So there is lots of trauma that needs to be healed, and before one can trust, I believe. I think that in our society, I mean, we are walking around with a mask all day.
Literally now, yeah.
Right now, you know.
Well, before people were walking around with these masks that they faked who they are, right?
Right. I would say, you know, the extreme of the mask that we are wearing today to protect ourselves from the COVID is just showing the fact that we were wearing a mask for a long time. Trust is on authenticity, you know. Trust is built around authentic relationship and authentic so the presence and authenticity of a person, and it is sustained by I would say by compassion and loving kindness. And I think trust also emerged from a place of equanimity, not only equality, but equanimity. It's probably the most fundamental source for cultivating a new regenerative mindset, because I think without trust, cooperation will not exist. And I think, especially because we are moving today through digital lines, in digital spaces, you need to trust to share and make yourself vulnerable. I strongly believe in the power of small tribes, so small groups, because over a certain numbers of team members or group members, the relationship is not authentic anymore. There is no space for intimacy, so for sharing in a way that is compassionate and authentic, transparent, open. And so maybe keep small groups will reinforce and will support our feeling of trust and of belonging also, because if you have a huge group, it's difficult to find yourself in.
Yeah, so, trust and belonging are an interesting pair.
Yeah.
Because as you said, like trauma and healing trauma, and that includes all of us. I think, you know, I've definitely had like a, comparatively speaking, milder childhood experience. You know, there's no massive trauma, but things that happen to us when we're younger, they're traumatic to the child, no matter how intense they are, right? Like if you're being told no or being told off, or you're in a, you know, a industrial revolution school system and told to perform in a certain way, they cause a form of trauma that make us only follow these modus operandi that are currently in place, and they lead us away from trusting ourselves. Yes. And so in that context of knowing, are we free of that trauma to actually fully trust ourselves, our inner calling, and then the groups with whom we collaborate. It's fascinating that you went there, because that feeling of belonging, I think every human being, every human soul is working on that in some way, form or other, because we've created a culture where you belong to the workplace, you belong to your nation, but those are illusions. They're not real in the sense of what matters to the heart of the soul.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is absolutely against nature, because over a certain amount of members, for example, also the classroom, over 15, the kids, they do not perform good anymore because they maybe feel lost. I mean, we have also introvert, extroverts, we all kind of different personalities, all kind of different brains. And I believe if you want to create a system that is inclusive by design, which is again a core element for creating a regenerative future, we need really to be careful when we create something. When we work in group, we incentivize co-creation and collaboration to not go over like this massive, huge social media container where everyone is in and no one is in, basically. So they're all out. Everyone is in, but we are all out. So.
Yeah, this idea of people checking out is, I think, something that everyone listening can relate to in some way, shape, or form. That there might have been a moment in your life where you checked out, or there might have been a moment in your life where you're like, I don't need to be fully present to this. But that's so inherent in how we've built things. Like, I'll give you an example. I was just at an airport yesterday, and you know, with the current pandemic, there's obviously a lot of changes in the way people are dealing with people, and the people that dealt with me in the process of moving through the protocol of what we need to comply with for traveling, they were pretty much checked out. Their answer was, "Oh, no, go to the machine and do it on the machine." That was the steady comment, right? So it's so checked out to even with the work that people are supposed to be doing, because there's no space for a human to human interaction, right? It's quite difficult actually to engage someone, to say, hey, I don't see you as the transaction to get my ticket stamped. I see you as another human who also will have to stamp my ticket. Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah. I hope that we will not replace human with the machine, because then the trust is getting really to a completely different level. I think 12 or 13 years ago, I did a project in one of the first metaverse of Second Life. And one of the core topic of my research was actually how we build identities and communities and trust inside of a virtual world. And I found it so fascinating because, of course, you can fake everything. And you see now that we have fake news, a fake profile, a fake whatever. And so this is, again, you know, if you want to think in terms of trust, how can we build mutually beneficial relationships that they are based on equanimity and loving kindness and compassion, and sustain cooperation, and sustain a thriving and balanced world where, well, everyone is welcome, where everyone can thrive.
I think in order to figure out how to do that, and maybe this is not the only pathway to get there, but following kind of the track of what's happening on this planet and, you know, the human consciousness as far as my personal insights go, I think we might have had to go all the way to this place. We might have had to go all the way to this place where we glorified the ego, where we glorified our individualism, to understand there is a necessity in taking care of yourself first. But if you take it too far and then you glorify yourself, the only consequence can be doom, right? Because we will ultimately destroy the planet. And so now that we have gone that far, it's becoming blatantly obvious. It's in fact becoming so obvious that the only other alternative of visionary future for the planet is to replace people with robots, to destroy the soil further, to, you know, create immunity passports and God knows what. And so I believe this is maybe right before midnight, but it's also the time where a lot of people and everyone listening certainly is like ready to awaken to a complete new role that humanity can play. And I have a question on that topic, actually, now that we kind of, you know, naturally went there. Ilaria, how has your personal optimism come back to you? Like, how do you find optimism in all this over and over again to show up for the work you do and to be inspired to, you know, teach others? And I'm curious.
I cannot define myself as an optimist. I would define myself as a realist. So I am very much, I try to see the reality for what it is. I believe that both pessimism and optimism, they are tendentially a bit extreme. And I think it's important that we learn to question everything, you know. So that if one is learn to question everything, you then start to, including our own views. This is something that I'm repeating over and over again. So not just question what the other people are saying, no, but also what I'm saying, what I'm, you know, this thought that I have
start
now.
With ourselves, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And so optimism might be, it's maybe sad to say counterproductive. It's not efficient, but I mean, it's as a dysfunctionality. And so I more embrace, as I said from the beginning, this light and shadow, both sides, you know. So when I see regeneration, I see degeneration. When I see cooperation, I see also separation. No, when we see black, we see also white. When we see the feminine force, we see also the masculine force. I mean, it's a constant interplay, interdependent flow of the Indra's net. So it's a net where the polarities and the complementary forces play hopefully harmoniously together. So I'm not sure if having an optimist view will help us, because the optimist, as the one that they push too far, the positive side, they end up ignoring the other side. And this is, I think, not what I would like to support. Again, because the system, I believe, has to be inclusive by design. And inclusive by design, it means you include everything. So you just don't let out the stuff that they are smelly, you know. So this is very important. I mean, most probably a Zen type of teaching, coming from the Zen tradition, to say, you know, you embrace the entire reality and not just what you like, you know, what is shining, and all the rest you just throw it away. It's all useful.
It's a good one. It's a good one. You know, you just said we should always challenge everything, including our own thoughts and our own convictions. And so I like optimism. And I think it's fundamentally important to embrace, you know, the Zen Buddhist wisdom you just shared around embracing the full spectrum of yin and yang and the full spectrum of black and white in that metaphorical sense. And so interesting. Maybe I'll have to rethink the way I look at optimism after this episode. And I'm open to that.
Please.
So, well, that's exactly what we were just talking about. Ilaria, is there anything else you'd love to share? Maybe, you know, another project of yours or like a little anecdote where you can highlight this kind of, you said it a few times, like this spontaneous emergence of the cross-pollination or of change that happens when people, when worldviews, when things collide in a positively facilitated way.
Yeah. It's going back to the effortless action. So this spontaneity, which is like the Wu Wei again. I mean, they just come up the Lao Tzu, nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. So I think it's kind of, you know, you're not gonna push, go and get it. It's like the opposite. So I really like surrender, embrace, and everything is accomplished. That doesn't mean that you are not acting, because our Western mind, when is contemplating the Wu Wei principle, is really thinking, oh, okay, just sit down on a pillow and some kind of, you know, supernatural force will arrive with a super conscious power and will give me everything I need. No, this is not like this. It means you act from a place of love, from a place of compassion, from a place of well, from a place where nature is there all the time. So you are embracing nature principle, and by doing that, you just, everything is accomplished without you having to force anything, you know, having to push anything. And I think, you know, let go of control, I think is a very important, very important learning from our control and fear and all type of this type of culture that we have created. That is completely degenerate, because, you know, you cannot control and start to spray some pesticides for controlling the earth, because then it's gonna be more, then you need to spray more. And this is like when you have to clean your hands, you have to clean it now 30 seconds, 50 seconds. It's all good, okay, it's fine, but it's a system of control that is not gonna serve any one of us, because it's against nature. So this is it.
And there's a time for everyone to understand and integrate what you just said. But I'm sure for everyone that time will come at some point where we see that the domination culture that we've practiced for at least 2,000 years as a species, you know, there is a threshold now where we can change these ways. And in other words, we must. My last question for you, Ilaria, is about, you know, like a deeper connection to the visionary soul that sits in your being. If we were to zoom out right now, just on the timeline of our existence, and we were to go into a 7-generational context here, and just imagine for a second, 210 years down the road, or, you know, kids, children's children, what's the dream or the vision or the hope you have for our species and for this planet?
I hope that we will refrain from causing harm to ourselves and to others, to animals, to plants, to the earth, the waters, the air. So my purpose is to alleviate the suffering of all beings. And I think and I hope that this will enter into the epigenetic, you know, into the system, into the memory of the cells of the next generation. And also the new story will enter into the heritage, into this beautiful future of the next generations. So I hope I will be, and I am, a good ancestor. So from a perspective, of my grandchild, and we look back and say, okay, grandma, she was actually trying to do her best to alleviate the suffering of the other beings, including her suffering.
Yeah,
yes.
I really hope they will all look back and be like, oh my God, they barely made it. They barely made it, but they were so full of themselves. Eh?
Absolutely.
That's I struggle with that sometimes, with this, like, how can I give more, and what really makes the difference? Not just move the needle in this, like, westernized industrial revolution kind of mindset, but what really makes the difference for those future generations.
Yes.
Ilaria, I'm grateful, to have shared the last 6 months with you in the Design Science Studio cohort. I'm thankful for your answers on this podcast interview. I'm really excited to stay connected and see what emerges, what kind of work we might share in the future. And for anyone listening, this is also a call for applications, meaning if you're inspired by Ilaria or by what I had to share in this episode, and if you are curious about the Design Science Studio cohort, check out the Science Studio. You can Google it. You can message me. I'll also put it into the show notes, and apply if you're one of those artists, creators, or scientists who, is at this cutting edge of creating and wants to meet, his or her tribe.
Yes.
Thank you, Ilaria.
Thank you very much, Julian, for inviting me today. It was a great conversation. Look forward to see more emerging from this beautiful podcast, and your fun energy and great compassion, open heart, great mind. Thank you.
Thank you.